Hello and welcome to this webinar. Today we'll be talking about 4 essential dynamics to help you have a healthy team. I'm grateful to be here with you and to share this exchange of information, especially because I have a particular passion about helping to make non-for-profit organizations in particular healthy places for people to work. It's my sense that people who work in nonprofits have chosen to work in such a place because they have a passion about the mission, and there's nothing more discouraging to that passion than showing up in a place that's unhealthy or dysfunctional. So I've kind of made it one of my life goals to have people show up for their work in nonprofit organizations by getting up in the morning and being excited and eager and happy about going to work every day. So I'm happy to share with you the information that we're going to look at during this next hour. So thank you for being with us. And I want to just begin by reviewing a few tips that will help you. You should be seeing a side panel with some gray boxes with things that you can interact with. One other way we're going to be interacting with each other in this is to have some polls. And when those polls, if you've not done this before, when those polls show up on the computer screen, you'll just have to click the circle next to the response that you want to use, and the system will record your response. Also, there's a question tab on the side panel that you should be able to access and leave a comment or question for us. And we'd like you to do that not only, I'm here by myself. I'll try to pay as much attention as I can to any questions that do get asked during the webinar. But that's also helpful for us if you want to comment, because all of that information becomes a part of the database that accompanies this webinar. So it's good information for us to have in the future. There's also, you should be able to see a handouts tab on that panel. And in that handouts tab, you'll find the PDF of the slides for this presentation. So you can download them if you'd like. And also, if you aren't able to do that through this system, we can just ask for them, email us. I'll give some contact information at the end. You can also ask for that PDF. I'm very happy to share it with you. And finally, I am recording this session, so you'll be able to receive a link for that one day after in a reminder message that we follow up with. Okay? And just a note, too, that all attendees' mics are muted, so you do have to use the question box in the panel to do that. If you aren't seeing the panel, you should pay attention to that picture here. There should be a little orange arrow, a little box with a little orange arrow. You just click on that and the panel will open up. Okay, with those few housekeeping details, I just want to remind everyone in terms of the marketing that I did around this webinar that we're going to look at these 4, what I'm calling 4 healthy team dynamics. Trust. We're going to look a little bit at what Patrick Lencioni says about that. Empathy, from a wonderful book called The Empathy Factor. And then advocacy and inquiry, which some of you may not be as familiar with, that a number of people are talking about now as really just a helpful tool for getting a balance on the way we share information and ask for information on our teams. And then finally, motivation, which I think is a very key part of team dynamics. So the first thing I want to do actually is introduce the first poll and get a sense from people who are on the webinar. In which of the 4 essentials would you say your team is presently most lacking, in which you would want to learn? And so I'm just going to put up a poll that will ask you to select one or all of the above. So I'll get ready to launch that poll. Now you should see on your screen a way to make a selection from the 5 options there: trust, empathy, advocacy, and inquiry or emotional intelligence, or maybe all of the above. And I'll wait another second to have people make their selection. And then I'm going to close the poll and show the poll results. We have about equal distribution actually between trust and advocacy and inquiry and motivation. So I'm hoping, given that what I'm going to share with you is going to be really helpful. So we'll hide that poll and move forward. The first thing, as I said, I want to talk about is trust. And if you have not read the book, The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team by Patrick Lencioni, I highly recommend it. And it's a simple read. It's kind of a fable in a way about a team and how things go and what the leader does to try to improve things. We're not going to go into all of that tonight. I just want to point out again that Patrick Lencioni suggests that the most critical element of a healthy team is trust, and that the way the 4 essential healthy team dynamics work, as far as I'm thinking now for this presentation, is that trust, that they all work together. It begins with trust, but the others, empathy and advocacy and motivation, that all of these are part of a system that keeps your team operating well, and that the critical relationship is actually between trust and motivation. You know, I'm sure you're aware, we often see this in films and in real life, that it's the leader that people trust for whom people will go the extra mile. They will do anything for a leader that for them has integrity, is someone that they can trust. So let's just say a little bit about what Lencioni suggests, why it's important. He says, remember, teamwork begins by building trust. It's the first thing you have to do. It's elemental, and that is an ongoing thing. Has to happen at every team meeting, that you're creating an environment among the team that people feel safe. They feel like they can be vulnerable. And it also means that you will respond to people respectfully, and that you're not in this for yourself. You know, kind of they can see that you're the servant leader type, that you're out for the betterment of everyone else, not just in this for your own sake. And also that not only creating a safe environment for the whole team, but in individual relationships that you're trying to build with each person on the team. And in the absence of trust, many of us have probably had these kinds of experiences where the team members will hold grudges, or dread coming to meetings because it's not a safe place, or people will not be open with each other. People can't talk about mistakes. People can't talk about what we need to do better. People hesitate to ask for help, or don't know necessarily how to provide feedback, which is a whole nother topic, a whole nother webinar. We're going to talk a little bit about communication skills as part of this session. So the whole thing just becomes a complete waste of everybody's time and energy, because it's not productive, and a team with trust, when the environment is safe and people are comfortable with each other and willing to both be vulnerable with each other and also to challenge one another. People are willing to admit their mistakes, they're willing to ask for help, they're willing to take risks, they're willing to learn from their mistakes. and we get to focus our time and energy on the issues that we need to focus on and not on interpersonal dynamics. And people actually look forward to coming to meetings because it's an enjoyable experience. So I hope that you're a part of that kind of team. If you're not, this will give you something to work towards. So with trust, is knowing that trust is a foundation, but communication skills are really critical to that. And I think a significant part of that is the practice of empathy. And I also want to recommend this book called The Empathy Factor by Marie Miyashiro, who is someone who studied with Marshall Rosenberg, who is really the founder of the nonviolent communication movement. And what she says about empathy is that empathy, she says, I believe that in the next 5 to 15 years, the skill of empathy will be one of the most sought after qualities by large corporations, universities, nonprofits, government agencies, and small businesses. That this is really because we're beginning slowly but surely to recognize that relationships in the workplace are critical. That's not just about the task that we're all here to do, but that if we pay attention to the quality of our relationships, things go much more smoothly. She says empathy is, being able to see, feel, and experience what the other person is experiencing. So there's what she calls a real connection going on between people. And others have said that, leaders need empathy because of 3 things that are happening even in the workplace. That it's a critical piece of being able to work well in teams. It also comes into play because we're in a global business environment, so we need to not only to understand people from our own culture, but other cultures as well. And it's also a huge part of what we might call talent management or keeping people, because people are happy to, again, be coming to work at our place. So leaders need to understand team members in order to help them collaborate. So we all need to know something critical about the people on our team. And what Marie says in her book is that empathy plays a role in forming connections between people. So she says it's important for us to move from just a think and do culture to a connect, think and do culture. So consider that in terms of your meetings. Do you start out your meetings by connecting with people before you get into the agenda and before you consider what needs to be done? And she says it makes all the difference in the success and productivity of a team. And that empathy is just connection to ourselves and between people, and it places a primacy on making sure that we're engaged with one another and we understand one another at a level that's important to effective team functioning. And so she talks about 3 levels of connection when we're practicing empathy. And the first level is our own personal state. How connected are we to what's going on for us as we sit around the table? And this was one of my first insights as I started working or being connected with nonprofit groups and trying to understand what was going on in meetings. I started, and this was 30 years ago when I started being at the table with other people who were trying to create peace and nonviolence and social justice in the world. And what I was experiencing was that we couldn't create peace and nonviolence at the meeting, never mind in the world. And so I began to consider what was going on, and I ultimately realized that who came to the table and how effective they were at understanding their own interior and what was going on for them around the agenda items that were being brought up was absolutely critical. How skilled they were at at understanding their own inner dynamic and how it was interacting with what was going on at the meeting. So the first connection is to your own personal state, and then it's moving to an awareness of others and their internal state as they come to the meeting, and perhaps having to, check in. You might have heard of the practice of check in and check out at meetings. This is a kind of a good way to gauge that. Start out the meeting by asking people to just, one of the simplest methods of check-in is to just say, on a scale of 1 to 10, how present are you at this meeting, or how much energy are you bringing into this, or that kind of thing. So, and then there's the whole team, of course, and the organization. And so we're connected on these 3 levels: to our own self, to others and their internal state, and to the whole team. And then in terms of the cross-cultural issues, leaders today must be able to read the cues that are being given off by other people who come from a different culture, and not make assumptions that people are in a place or in a space or have needs that are the same as mine. And even interpreting body language, might be a part of that. There's all kinds of different things. So we have to be attentive to and making the connection with people within the culture that they're coming from, and crossing that cultural divide. And then finally, the point that leaders need empathy. They need to be skilled at empathy, because empathy is a part of what can increase satisfaction and reduce turnover. So it's, again, an important piece of talent management. So, trying to find our way, increase our ability to tap into what the different kinds of challenges that we're facing within an organization are doing to the emotional life of people, and how to address that, and just find the language, find the opportunities to do that, to try to say what needs to be said to dispel anxiety and keep people on an even keel. So I'm just going to take a minute here to share with you this one method of nonviolent communication, or in other words, a way that you can have a conversation that gets at your internal state with another person, and what's going on for them when something happens in a meeting, or there's a potential conflict, and there might be an occasion where something happens in a meeting and it sets off such a high intense emotional response for you that you might have to wait and do this after the meeting, when you have collected yourself and have a better understanding yourself of what actually transpired and what's underneath the feelings that emerged for you. But this is a nonviolent technique, and as I just want to point out here, pause for a second and point out that, as I said, this PDF will be available to you so that you can have this and keep it and practice, or you can go to to get more information from the Center for Nonviolent Communication at their website, which is cnvc.org. But this is, if you've never come across this before, this is a way to enter into, it's like a tool, like a formula for entering into a conversation. When something happens, the first thing you do is you just state what happened. And as objectively as you can. And you don't use language that attacks or defends. You just, as objectively as you can, state what happened. And then you try to get in touch with the feelings that arose for you as you sat there observing what happened, or being the recipient of what happened. And again, trying to choose language that's about you and not about them. You don't say, "You made me feel angry." You say, "I realized when da 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 happened that I got angry, and I'm trying to, sort out what that's about. And I think it's because, and then you state your need around that, because that's one of the things that comes through in Marshall Rosenberg's writings and teachings about nonviolent communications, is that absolutely everything we do in life, we do because we have a need. I have a need for greater clarity, or I have a need to, like, if someone, let's say someone in the meeting all of a sudden starts speaking really angrily or loudly themselves, and you might be able to say, I felt, threatened or anxious. I felt vulnerable. I felt whatever, because I have a need to feel safe in this meeting, and it's uncomfortable for me because I grew up in a family where no one raised their voice. Someone speaking loudly or angrily like that triggers all kinds of responses for me, so I can't focus on the work that we're trying to do. So in the future, it would be helpful to me if we would all try to speak more calmly and think about how we're going to work together or address things. So the basic formula then is to speak your observation of what happened. And it could be that, what you saw happen wasn't what 10 other people saw happen, but that's not important. What's important is what was going on for you. So what you observed happening, state your feelings that came up for you, and try to connect your feeling with your need. And if you're not confident about that, again, if you go to the Center for Nonviolent Communication website, they have whole lists there of words around feelings and how we feel when our needs are met, and how we feel when our needs aren't met. I have a very simple need, actually. I can't focus if I'm hungry, and so when the meeting goes on and we don't take a break, I need to, I start to feel anxious. I can't concentrate because I have this issue of low blood sugar or whatever it is. But so my request would be, can we, after at least 45 minutes to an hour, can we take a short break so that I can get a snack or something, depending on the time of day of the meeting. So it can be as simple as that, or it can be much more complicated. But just as a little practice, I thought maybe you could give it a try here. I'll give you just a couple of minutes to think about this. In what I've said so far, even, for example, so this could apply to you sitting in a meeting. In what I have presented so far, what's one idea that has been of value to you? So just stop and think for a minute what I said about trust, what I said about empathy, what I said about nonviolent communication. Is there something there that stood out for you? And then is there any particular feeling that you had that you might associate with hearing that topic, or hearing that statement, or reading that quote on the slide? And then can you connect that feeling to a need that you had? Some of you talked about your team's lacking trust, or your team, and it might be that you're feeling, wow, I'd really like to be able to do this because we really have a need for this, because we spend so much time at our meetings wasting time, not focused on it because of interpersonal dynamics. And so I'd like to really make a request of myself for the future that I learn more about this and do something. So just as another example of how to start that thought process of thinking about what happened and what feelings it stirred in me, and can I connect those feelings to a need, and then can I think about what I can change, what needs to be done to change that in the future. Okay, so given that, I've just talked about trust and the practice of empathy. Let's do another poll. And here's some options. I just want to get a touch base before we move on to another topic. Where would you be on this response sheet? Identify the absence of trust on my team, what we just talked about, helped you with a better picture of your team and what's going on in your team. Identify the absence of empathy behaviors on my team. That's something I want to learn more about. Or, begin to wonder how I might bring these ideas up, or recognize that we actually do this well on my team. And has it been my articulating this, just throwing this up there as a possibility, something that is helpful to you? So I'm going to throw up launch this poll again and ask you to just choose one of those so we can see how we're doing here. Okay. I'll wait just a few more seconds to give people a chance to vote. Okay, everyone's voted. I'm going to close the poll and share the results. Hopefully you can see that now. Okay, 67% said begin to wonder how I might bring this to my team. That's great. Given what we started out with in terms of your interest in this webinar and what you were looking for. Interesting that we're all looking for help on this, because nobody said, yes, we already do this well. So good, great, terrific. That says we're doing good and making progress on what you need to learn. Okay, now moving on, I'm going to talk some about this process of advocacy and inquiry. And if you just Google those two words, you'll find a lot of helpful articles, whatnot, about this. I first learned about it through the Society for Organizational Learning, but it's a little bit, it dives a little bit deep into how to hold conversations with your team, but I think it's worth our time to go into it in a little bit of detail, because I find it really kind of opens up an opportunity for me to assess the way I behave in a meeting and the way I run a meeting. So advocacy is explained as what we do. That's what we're doing when we're stating our views or our feelings or our judgment about something, or we're giving an instruction or an order as a leader. So just think about how much time you spend doing that. Like I was at a meeting this morning, and I'm supposed to be coordinating that meeting, and I, as often happens to me when I'm in the shower or some other time, I think of some ideas about where we need to go and what we should be doing, and so I type that up and I bring it to the meeting and I say, this is kind of the agenda or some of my thoughts, but how do I balance that experience, which is a frequent one, with this whole idea of inquiry, which means I also ask questions to seek additional information. And so the people who came up with this whole concept put that on like an XY grid here, where we're trying to balance advocacy and inquiry and what that looks like. So starting out, if we, in this 4-quadrant grid, if we are coming to a meeting, or others come to a meeting, and you've probably observed this, with low advocacy and low inquiry, those people are pretty much just sitting around observing what's going on. And or they don't make comments in the meeting, they make them after the meeting out by the water cooler or whatever. So, they might be as the dysfunctional is pointed out here, they might be people who are just mentally checked out and they're not paying attention. So we have those kinds of folks in our meeting, or maybe we ourselves have been at meetings we wouldn't particularly want to be at, and that's our behavior. And then you could think about high inquiry but still low advocacy as I'm in here and I'm just in here to explore others' point of view, and and asking questions, and I haven't a need or having a desire or don't feel confident enough to share my own thoughts, so I come to the meeting and I just ask a lot of questions. And of course the dysfunctional side of that is then when you ask those questions in an attacking sort of way. You know, why can't you see that you're wrong? And that, as it's quoted here. Another low inquiry but high advocacy kind of behavior is labeled, as they label it here, just telling, you know, that I come into the meeting and I say, the world works like this, or, you know, this is the way things are, and this is what I say goes, and then of course the dysfunctional flip side of that, going to the extreme, is I don't care what you think, this is what we're going to do. Okay, and we've probably been in those kinds of experiences ourselves. But if you have what they call a balance of high inquiry and high advocacy, you can get to this place where dialogue is really happening, and it's happening well, and we're doing both things. We're balancing. You know, I'm saying what I think, but I'm also checking in with you to see what you think or how you respond to what I have just said, and doing that with honesty and integrity, not trying to pretend that you're open to suggestions, but not really. You know, we've all seen that happen to people who are good at talking the collaborative talk, but not necessarily good at walking the collaborative talk. And now I'm going to give you some slides that people are often asking, well, what would you say in that circumstance? How would you phrase it? You know, so you want to state your assumptions. Here's what I think, and here's how I got there. Because that's the other part about this is making sure that everybody has all the data. And sometimes, like me, that as an introverted thinker, that's sometimes hard for me. I know I get to the conclusion and I share the conclusion, but I can't. It takes me some doing to go back and put all the pieces of the gestalt together for how I got there. So, or another one we often get caught up in is explaining our assumptions to people, or I came to this conclusion because. So, how you want to you know, just how you practice improved advocacy. You know, to get a clear picture of what I'm talking about, imagine you're a customer who will be affected, you know, so explain the context or give examples. Or these are kind of non-threatening, non-violent, creative ways of sharing your information, your data. But then you want others to explore that, and you want to test your assumptions and conclusions. So you're going to want to be able to say things to people that invite this kind of dialogue and exchange. You know, what do you think about what I just said? Or what could you add? Or do you see any flaws in my reasoning? Or here's an aspect which you might help me think through, because I'm not totally clear on this. I have some ideas, but I don't know all of it. Or just simply, do you see things differently? Tell me, you know, based on your experience, based on your perspective, where you're coming from, you know, can you add to the conversation? Same thing for inquiry, you know, some examples of how to keep the conversation going. You know, someone says something, puts their thing out there, and in a non-threatening, non-violent way, can you just engage? So, what led you to conclude that, or what causes you to say that, and using, again, unaggressive, nonviolent language, instead of what do you mean, or why would you think that, or, can you help me understand? I think I like the last one here on this example. Can you help me understand your thinking? Can you help, draw a picture for me, or tell me the story of how you got to be thinking what you're thinking? Or, what does your reasoning, where does your reasoning come from, or what's the significance, or how does this relate to what we've been talking about? Any of those kinds of questions. Or the super good one, I'm asking you about your assumptions, because I need some more. We all need to be clear on what's being assumed here. And here's some other quick examples. How would your proposal affect? Um, can you give me an example? Or let's delve more deeply into this. And am I understanding you correctly? Am I that kind of thing? So, and then of course there's what to do when in that balance of advocacy and inquiry, when we're talking with someone who disagrees with us. How did you arrive at this view? Are you taking into account data that I have not considered? If I understand you correctly, make sure that you are hearing the other person and that the other person knows that they're being heard, and do some more explanation. So these are all just word phrases, examples of how how we can improve our interaction with other folks, so that we're really truly having a dialogue, and we're going to generate such a more creative, innovative, and productive result of this conversation. So just some examples again to invite you. Here, this is a protocol for when you're actually at an impasse. When you maybe we don't know as much as we should know. Maybe are there is there more data that we need to look for? And this next one, look for information which will help people move forward. What if in my experience, a good question to ask at this point is there something else you would need in order to be able to make a decision, or be able to support this proposal, or whatever? What do we, so what do we agree upon, and what do we disagree upon? So we can start there, and then then we know that we have an area of common ground, but there are still some things that we need to mine, do some more work on, come up with more information about, whatever. And again, the critical thing is mental models, assumptions. How do we get at those? Are we starting from two different sets of assumptions? And let's get all that out on the table. So, and also considering alternatives. Getting all of that. Like I was, for the first time I think in my life, I was at a meeting the other day where somebody said, after ideas were being thrown around and getting close to a decision, somebody said, well, what would be the negative consequences if we did this? And that has been a real passion of mine for a long time. And I think it was the first time I ever heard a leader in a meeting actually ask that question, which is so critical. Is there something that we've missed, that we haven't thought about, that would really be a negative for that? So those are some introductions to advocacy and inquiry. As I said, you can look more deeply as you get the PowerPoint for this, or you can go online and look for that. But again, I'm trying to create a healthy team where healthy dialogue is going on and productive work is going on, and I think just some of these simple tools are very key to that. So let's just pause and take a breath, and I'll move us into emotional intelligence as the fourth essential dynamic. And some of you are probably already very familiar with Daniel Goleman's work on emotional intelligence. And we could do a whole webinar on that. But I want to just touch on a few things that have to do with the importance of this in relationship to motivation and how I'm seeing it as all of a piece, these four essential dynamics. So Goleman says, understanding the powerful role of emotions in the workplace sets the best leaders apart. So again, paying attention to people's feelings, what's happening for them, and then adding that insight from Marie about the empathy factor, that it's that our emotions, the emotions that show up in the person and show up in the workplace, are connected to needs that are either being met or not being met. And so if a person is having some kind of emotional state that you're concerned about, the way to address that is, from Marie's perspective, is to talk to the person about, is there something you need? Is there some, or to try to, if you don't have an opportunity to talk to them, to even try to, she suggests as a leader or facilitator of a meeting, that you sit there and try to even imagine for yourself, what if this person is behaving this way, what might their need be that's not being met right now? That they're behaving in such a way. So as Goleman says, the best leaders, it's one thing to say the best leaders understand the powerful role of emotions in the workplace. It's another thing, I think, to be a leader who knows, that has the tools, and knows how to actually approach that. So that's why I think some of what I've been sharing with you about the nonviolent communication and the advocacy and inquiry process helps you with some real solid tools to be able to work with people's emotions. So, Goleman is saying that being able to do this, being able to pay attention, has important benefits, higher morale, motivation, and commitment among them. And you're probably familiar with his notion that there are 5 components of emotional intelligence: self-awareness, self-regulation, motivation, empathy, and social skill. I see that an adjustment in my slides, at least on my screen, has dropped the letter off on those. Apologize for that. But we're only going to talk now about motivation, because we actually talked a little bit about self-awareness and self-regulation in talking about trust and these other things, and social skills and empathy. So we've already covered the others, so we're just going to focus a little bit here on motivation. And we might define motivation as, certainly a passion for our work, a desire to as they say here from the Harvard Business Review, desire to raise the bar, desire to maybe even be somewhat competitive, to do better myself, and also to help us in our organizations make the world a better place, to do better at that. And it's also related to commitment to the organization, and having an optimism, being convinced that we actually can make the world a better place. Goleman goes on to say that great leaders move us. They ignite our passion and inspire the best in us. But even if they get everything else right, if leaders fail to pay attention to the emotions and move them in the right direction, then nothing they will do will work well as it needs to. Because and this, I think, is a huge change that's also taking place in our understanding of the workplace and our understanding of who's in the workplace, and recognizing that as human beings, we are these creatures who have within our brains the source of emotion, which plays a critical role in how we show up in the world and how we behave. And so the more we can learn about that and identify that and understand as leaders what's going on for everyone who's sitting around the table and what's triggering the emotions that are coming across, whether it's everything from boredom to, high anger and anxiety or whatever. But to be able to be skilled as leaders to understand what's happening emotionally and then create an environment in which people are going to be motivated to hang in there, to come back every day, to put out their best for the organization, because we've created a healthy environment in which they can do that. Motivation is less about employees doing great work and more about employees feeling great about their work, and I would say about their workplace. Again, this is from the Harvard Business Review and from studies, endless studies about motivation and talent management and the relationship. So I'm trying here again to suggest that that even if you just focus on these 4 dynamics, you should be able to create the kind of healthy work environment that people will want to be in. They will want to give their best because they will work towards creating the kind of trust environment where people know they can be vulnerable, because we're good at this thing called advocacy and inquiry. We're good at making connection through empathy, and all of which helps to improve people's sense of motivation, so that there's an interplay among all of these, and it's going to get us where we want to go in terms of being healthy. So I'm going to do a last thing here is another poll to ask you to give me feedback on the most important takeaway for me is the information on, and then we have a few minutes, maybe about 10 minutes or so, to see if you have any questions. If there's something else we can talk about, you want to hang in there with me on the webinar. So I'm going to just launch this last poll because it'll help me know in terms of future webinars or future topics. If you could just answer this last poll for me in terms of which one of these items was the most important takeaway for you. And then also if you could find your spot for asking questions, and I will pull that up after I launch the poll. Okay, we have everyone voted. We close the poll and share the results. And I hope you can see the results as 33% said trust, 33% said advocacy and inquiry, and 33% said motivation. So good. I'm glad to know that what I've shared with you it has been helpful. And let's see if you have any questions or comments, or any more that I can share with you. I'll move just before I do that. I'll move on to the last slide so you have my contact information. And do email me at pbombard@depaul.edu if you need to get the PDF. And as I said, everyone will get a I think I just did something wrong. Hold on. Okay, Catherine, I thought all the information was very helpful. I'd be interested in a follow-up specifically on motivation. Okay. Uh, Catherine, can you, if you can take a minute, could you just type, when you say specifically on motivation, is there anything in particular on motivation that you'd like to hear more about, or are you just interested in the topic in general so that anything I would put together would be okay? And then we have Judith, who says, how does one utilize concepts if they aren't the leader? Aha, yes, that's a great question. You can be a role model to use the concepts because people, like, even if you use the nonviolent communication tool or some of those statements in the advocacy and inquiry piece, if you start doing that in meetings, what you basically are is modeling the way, as Kouzes and Posner would say in their book, Leadership Practices. You know, in any, and that's kind of the approach that we take in the School of Public Service and Vincent Leadership, the Hay Project, where I work at DePaul, is that leadership is not a title. Leadership is everybody's business. So that you have an opportunity to model these kinds of things. Take Marie's notion of, the 3 levels of connection. How connected am I to myself? So if you're able in a meeting, I'll never forget the first time I became the executive director of a not-for-profit organization in a place where people were quite trained at these kinds of things. And the first time I sat in on a staff meeting and a person said to me, because we used to do check-in and check-out, and at the checkout time, one of the team members said, I have to take some time to think about that such and such agenda item, because I could tell as we talked about it that I was starting to get angry, and I need to step away and figure out what that's about, so that the next time we talk about it, I'll be clearer about what surfaced that for me. So that's the kind of thing. I mean, you do that in a meeting, and people are like, "Whoa, she has just raised the bar in terms of how we're supposed to interact here." And so I hope that encourages you and helps you. But that's what I would say. If you're not the leader, all you need to do is model the way. Okay, another person. Oh, different troubleshooting scenarios, things that kind of are blocks to motivation. And the 5 dysfunctions of a team. Yeah, someone now has asked, has anyone ever tried reading Dysfunctions of a Team in a book club type way? Yes, I never did it. I can't say that I've done it with an entire team. I actually ran a book club on the book, but the people who came to it were leaders of nonprofit organizations or departments in the university that were interested in the book and exploring it together. But I would, so I can't say, I don't know if anyone else wants to chime in, but I can't, I have not done it with a specific team. But if you read the book, it will certainly help you, and you don't necessarily have to even read the book together. You can begin with your team to try to address things that need to be addressed. And the book is a really good, and his website, Patrick Lencioni's website, there's good material on there for how to begin to talk about trust issues with your team, or some of the other things. Of course, the next, he talks about the next, once you get to the trust thing, the next thing is how good is the team at dealing with conflict, which won't happen. People will never deal adequately with conflict unless there's a trust level on the team already. And so he has exercises like starting out. One of the things that can build trust on a team is that just the idea of telling stories, getting together, having a team retreat, having people share something of their life story, apart from their work life. So there's all kinds of suggestions for how to begin to build trust on the team if it's not there, by, once again, recognizing that we're all human beings. We all, we have a life outside of work. We have a history outside of work. So, where have I come from? What were significant moments in that experience for me? Just any of those kinds of things. So, good question. Okay, not seeing anyone else's question, but Catherine, maybe what I'll also do is get in touch with you specifically to talk about, how I might be helpful in terms of what you're looking for with more on motivation. So once again, I want to thank you all for joining me for this webinar, and enjoy the rest of your day. And look for our next webinar is coming up later this month, another one with Mary McGinnis, and so that I'll include that in the information that goes out with the recording link. But I really appreciate you being here and look forward to having you be part of another webinar soon. So take care and enjoy life and enjoy your team.